that wonderful piece of art that is horses, that was to remain forever a piece of art, in the same sense that Howl will remain forever as a timepiece, a turning. It's a signal that totally changes the direction of culture. And that's an amazing thing to do. And I mean, she didn't only do it, she then delivered it.
Released in November 1975, Horses quickly gained a cult following, and with its fusion of garage rock, stream of consciousness, poetry, and punk attitude, it incited a shift in rock aesthetics. Following both US and European tours, the band began work on Smith's second album, Radio Ethiopia. A decision to replace John Cale with Aerosmith producer Jack Douglas suggested that the group was seeking a more mainstream sound.
By 1976, I had worked with Allen Ginsberg, Bob Dylan, the New York Dolls. I was part of the downtown scene. And at the same time, I was producing Aerosmith, Alice Cooper, Cheap Trick. So there was kind of an art and rock combination going on that may have seemed attractive to Patti's manager. Patti, I don't think, had any idea who I was, and that was fine. And I knew very little about Patti, though I did go out and buy the album, and I had seen her around Max's, because I used to hang out at Max's all the time. That's where the Dolls were. They came out of Max's. And I think they were maybe looking for a more commercial sound. And they thought because of the Aerosmith and Alice Cooper Cheap Trick that I would be the guy for it. You know, Clive certainly thought that I would bring a commerciality to it that didn't exist before.
Yeah, this is somebody who wanted an audience. I mean, none of the artists that she admired, I mean, they were all big. You know, this was not somebody who fetishized, you know, slaving away somewhere and not having any listeners. I think she had ambitions, you know, of a commercial nature. I think she would think of it as wanting to reach as many people as possible. And that's legitimate. I mean, it's popular music.
There was a concerted effort not to remake the first album at all, you know, because it stood as something already, and so we really wanted to get away from that completely. Otherwise, she would have gone back in with John Cale, and I think John Cale made the definitive first album with her. It's such a statement. So if we tried to remake that album or follow up on it, we would have failed. We failed anyway, because it wasn't until many years later that the critics finally said, well, you know what, this is an important album. When it came out, everyone was looking for the follow-up to Horses, and we didn't deliver that at all. We went in a totally other direction. We went for sonics, for noise, for raw power, and sitting Patti's voice inside of this cacophony of emotional sounds. Yeah, it was politics, pissing in a river. You know, if you listen to the lyrics, they're all statements.
Though the lyrical content of Radio Ethiopia may have retained Smith's radical spirit, many of the album's songs occupied a more traditional sonic territory.
I think on Radio Ethiopia, even as internal a record as it was, there were these kind of moments like Ask the Angels, which really seemed to be like based on a desire to write a hit, you know, which, you know, certainly at that point was just an unlikely aspiration. You know, it was not necessarily something that was going to happen.
that's what happens, the second album syndrome. You want to keep your old audience, and which in many ways I think Radio Ethiopia title track pandered to that, but at the same time you want to reach out to a new audience, and so you've got Jack Douglas in there who's produced Aerosmith, you've got Lenny Kaye, you know, they love the Stones, Patti and Lenny, so they're coming up with these Stones kind of riffs, very much out of, you know, the Keith Richards riffs, and that's kind of just to grab the mainstream blue-collar, denim, check shirt kind of huge audience in America, get them to hook them in with that, and perhaps they'll come round to the poetry, art kind of statement later.
When you think of Horses, and you're probably thinking of Patti Smith writing the lyrics, and then them finding a certain, improvising a music that goes with it, and probably with Radio Ethiopia, what you're probably seeing is the music and the lyrics are probably being improvised a lot more at the same time. And so perhaps the idea that Ivan Kral is co-writing Ain't It Strange and Pissing in the River and Ask the Angels, that these are the more commercial tracks on the album, the more melodic ones, the ones that would almost get airplay but not quite.
In stark contrast to Ask the Angels, the title track Radio Ethiopia was much less structured and accessible. Critics dismissed the lengthy neo-psychedelic improvisation as 10 minutes of self-indulgent noise.
At the time we were doing that record, every night after we'd finish whatever songs we were doing, we'd take a shot at doing Radio Ethiopia, so that we had a lot of different moods for this song. But we couldn't quite get it. Some critics will say we never quite got it, but that's the critics. But we never felt that it was what it was supposed to be. We tried it, and we tried it, and we tried it. I lived out in a place called Montclair, New Jersey, which was a 45-minute drive into Manhattan. So this one particular night, in blows a ferocious hurricane, comes blowing in off the Atlantic. And they tell everyone over the radio, do not go out in the streets, do not drive, stay off the roads. Don't do, you know, to stay off the street is going to be terrible. The wind's going to be blowing at 100 miles an hour. There's going to be flooding. It's going to be terrible. So I said, well, we're going to take the day off. Patti said, fine. I'm having dinner. The phone rings about 7:30 in the evening. The phone rings, and it's Patti. And she says, tonight's the night. Don't you feel it? I said, Patti, it's a hurricane blowing outside. She said, exactly. That's what we need. We need the hurricane to do this. So I said, well, you know, you want me to drive into the city? No one's allowed even on the road. She said, you can do it. So I got in my car and drove in. It was like risking my life. Got into Manhattan, parked near the studio, got blown into the door. I called up Jay Messina, who was the engineer on the date. He said, are you nuts? I can't even get a cab. I said, well, just take the subway down. He did. And the band came, and Patti, and we were worried that even the power wouldn't stay on. But Patti said, while the power is on, we've got to do it. And we did, and it wouldn't be ironic to say it was a mess and we didn't get it, but we did. But we did. It was incredible. It was incredible. She was right. It was just the kind of, it was just, I think, the result of danger, you know, of risking our lives to get there.
You know, Patti Smith totally bought into the idea that, you know, the sort of the creativity is all about, you know, just capturing the right moment. I don't think she's someone who believed at the time of Horses or before or after, and, you know, you keep working on one song until you've recorded it. I think she's totally about spontaneity and improvisation, and You know, there are all these kind of famous stories about how she wrote her poetry, that she'd sit at her typewriter and she'd masturbate for it until just the right moment in her mind for the words to appear. You know, and it was all about getting to that place.
The idea of the song is, you know, to take this kind of reggae holy land, essentially, and, you know, set that up as a kind of Eden, and use a kind of smashing of the senses as a means of getting there, you know? I think, and so that's why the music is as raw as it is.
Patti's voice at that stage was absolutely unique, all these whoops and whelps, and she'd use it like an instrument.
It's loose without being self-indulgent. When it is self-indulgent, it's self-indulgent in an almost humorous way. You know who Marion Brown is? The saxophone player, the avant-garde saxophone player? He really couldn't play. I don't like Marion Brown very much, but I think that they do the same kind of thing Marion Brown did. There was a lot of squawking in that band, or the rock and roll equivalent of squawking. And then, for the most part, and especially in retrospect, it wasn't pretentious at all.
But to say that it was just noise is, you know, it's like saying that Jackson Pollock's work is just a bunch of squiggles thrown on the ground. Some people will always believe that, and some people finally get what Radio Ethiopia is. You know, it's partly Jimi Hendrix. Some people could have just listened to Jimmy's guitar only and said, you know, we don't need to listen to the drums or the vocals or anything. Like, just give us all that squeal, and that's beautiful. And Patti felt that. That was a very important part of it. The cacophony, the noise, the risk. That's where we went.
That's what these songs are meant to capture. They are about their sound. Her words are even just about their sound in a way. You know, they're, in addition to what she's saying, they're meant to just be mesmeric. They're meant to just kind of hypnotize. That's the goal.
Released in November 1976, Radio Ethiopia was both commercially and critically unsuccessful, and it failed to build on the interest that had been excited by Horses. The album was labelled as confused and inconsistent, with free-form radical material sitting uneasily alongside more conventional compositions.
Radio Ethiopia, I'm sure from the offset they were thinking this is going to be difficult to sell in everything about it, the sleeve notes and these sort of Dylan-esque ramblings, the title, you know, what's Radio Ethiopia mean to you know, an American radio audience at this time, and musically, you know, it is definitely confused. There are 70s rock power chords happening and melodic, you know, punch in the air choruses, and then there are songs that are just, you know, complete, you know, what you can't really call them anything but art rock. You know, it's chaos.
During the Radio Ethiopia tour in early 1977, Patti Smith fell from the stage in Tampa, Florida, breaking 2 vertebrae in her neck. The accident required a considerable recovery period and rendered the band inactive during the height of the punk movement. Even so, it provided Smith with an opportunity to reflect, re-energize, and contemplate the next step in her career, and she eventually returned to recording in 1978, producing new material around themes of resurrection and renewal. The resulting album, Easter, produced by Jimmy Iovine, proved to be her most commercially successful work.
It had a very spiritual vibe to me, which I thought, okay, now she's taken her intellectual thing and she's added spirituality to it, which I thought was great.
It's suggesting where she's going perhaps in her personal life from then on. This sense, a little bit of tranquility and healing is setting in there.